Jack's words caused the two ladies to raise their brows. Celine looked at his with a smile that had a hint of teasing. She asked, "Between the two of us, who would you like to be in your car?" Jack hadn't seen that question coming at all. Now that he was asked, he thought to himself, "Ain't it obvious? I came here to pick you up. So, I would want you to be in my car." But he didn't say that out loud. He had interacted with several girls previously. Although none of the interaction was romantic or such, he at least knew something basic. If he chose Celine, he was sure that Faith would be offended. If he chose Faith, Celine would be offended. If he chose none of them, he was sure that both of them would be offended. Such a situation needed serious consideration. On the other hand, Faith was looking at Celine weirdly. She thought to herself, since when did this young lady start teasing men? Then, she looked at Jack with squinted eyes. These two must be trying to play me here. They must have known each other a long time ago but are trying to fool me here. After a few seconds of consideration, Jack came to an appropriate decision. "Can your car accommodate 4 people at the same time?" he asked while looking at Celine. "Not really. Just like yours, mine can only carry 2 people. It's a sports car." Celine replied as her smile became wider. She wanted to see how Jack's thinking process was. Although she was thinking on this way, in her heart, she wanted him to choose her. "Since we're both heading to the same destination, and our cars can only accommodate 2 people, let's take a cab. It can carry all of us," Jack said. Celine and Faith went agape the moment that they heard Jack's solution. They had thought that he would be forced to pick one of them or none now that neither his nor Celine's car couldn't carry them both. Who would have thought that Jack would suggest that they leave their cars here and take a cab instead? They were both amazed, but at the same time, Celine had some grievance in her heart. "Can't you just pick me?" After a moment of silence, Celine waved her hand and said, "There's no need for a cab. Faith is still going to the new company to do something. So, there's no need to take a cab. I'll just take your car while Faith takes mine." It was also at this moment that Jack noticed that she was teasing him. He then thought to himself that he must return this debt. How could he, a man, accept someone to tease him easily? Faith didn't have a disagreement at all. Although she had some doubts about the two, Jack's answer had made her to be at ease with him. If he had instantly decided on taking Celine with him, she would have a bad impression of him. They both left the hotel in the 2 cars. Jack was driving while Celine was on the passenger seat. He didn't put on any stunts while driving this time. On the way, they talked about this and that, getting familiar with each other. Not long after, they arrived at the Business Overlord building. Celine wasn't expecting that Jack's new business would be located here. Although she'd seen taller than this, when you see a taller dwarf, you will be surprised, right? After parking the car, he saw that Tim had already arrived. It seemed that he'd never forgotten this car that was owned by Jack. The moment that the duo got out of the car, he stepped forward and greeted. "Morning, boss, madam." The moment that Tim called Celine madam, Celine blushed. After all, the way that Tim had referred to her was the same as calling her as Jack's girlfriend, or maybe wife. "Hey, I'm not his wife. We've only met a few times and we began talking yesterday." Celine wanted to shout out these words, but for some reason, she held back while looking at Jack. Jack, on the other hand, didn't say a word and just nodded at Tim. "Morning, on what floor is Chris and the others?" Jack asked. "They're on the 7th floor. Tim replied. "I got it. Thanks." Jack said to Tim before turning to Celine and said, "Let's go." Celine was wondering what Jack was thinking by not clarifying the fact that they had no such of relationship that Tim was thinking. But what made her frown a little was the fact that Jack didn't know what floor the meeting was located. "You don't know what floor your office is located?" She couldn't help but ask. "I just told them to pick a floor and set up an office there. Today is when the grocery department will start running by management centralization." Jack said, "Pick a floor? Are they free? Why didn't I know about that? If I did, I surely would have brought my friend's company here," Celine said with a sad look on her face. For some reason, Jack smiled and said, "You can choose one too. They're free." "Are you kidding me? If it was free, then there would be many people picking their own floors." Celine asked. "Well, why don't you try it? There's a person in charge of the building on the ground floor. Or you can ask the receptionist," Jack stated. Celine looked at Jack suspiciously. She couldn't accept this fact that there was someone who would spend his own money to build an office building only to give it out for free. Without a word, they arrived on the ground floor. This floor had been set up in such a way that it was a reception area and a lobby. This was the renovation that Sabrina had arranged after Jack made the request. There was nothing much to do. It was just placing the receptionist's desk as well as the couches for the guests in waiting. After getting to the front desk, Jack looked at Celine and gave her a go-ahead. At the same time, he sent a message to Chris to come down. Although he had bought this building, the new employees here didn't know him. A good example would be the gentleman working as a receptionist. After sending the text, he turned his attention to the conversation between the two. "Are you serious, miss? How can this building be free? This building has already been bought and isn't in the market. Even if it was, there's nobody that would offer such a building for free, right?" The man said with a frown on his face. Since the building had only the ones in charge of cleaning and security, but was almost empty. On this ground floor, there was only the receptionist and a security guard. "Are you sure about that? I've been told by someone that it is free," Celine said as she squinted her eyes at Jack. On seeing her expression, Jack felt like laughing out loud, but in the end, he suppressed his laughter and just smiled. Upon seeing this, Celine knew that she had been duped. Her face blushed in both shame and embarrassment. At this moment, she felt some resentment towards Jack. The reason behind this was due to him making a fool out of her. "Jack, how dare you lie to me?" Celine asked angrily as she stumped her foot onto the ground. Noticing that he seemed to have gone a little far, Jack could only smile and say, "I'm sorry about that. But that's a comeback for teasing me back in the hotel." Celine took deep breaths as she tried to contain her anger. This was the first time that a person had made a fool out of her. But in the end, she didn't know why she couldn't slap that smiling face of his. "But it's true that you can get a floor here for free. Do you want it?" Jack asked. "Humph. Whom are you trying to tease again? I'm not that gullible to fall for the same trick twice," Celine said as she turned her face away from him. "I'm serious this time. I'm not lying," Jack said seriously. Celine looked at his serious expression for a moment before shifting her gaze towards the receptionist. The receptionist, although he was kind and easygoing to those that visited the building, he couldn't take it anymore when he saw that Jack kept on saying that the building was offering a floor for free. Who does he think he is? Does he think that he can joke around with other people's property? The receptionist thought to himself. "Sir, I don't think that it's appropriate for you to start lying to others about serious things. You know you can be sued for fraud," he stated with a serious expression on his face. According to what he could think of, Jack was here with the intention of pleasing this girl. It seemed that he wanted her to be his girl, and that was why he was formulating lies. Jack looked at the receptionist, but didn't reply. He just looked at Celine, waiting for her decision. This was his building, and he could make a decision to give out floors for free. But currently, the only thing that he needed was to know that she was serious about moving her company here. Celine didn't know what to do. The receptionist said that there were no free floors, while on the other hand, Jack seemed serious about what he was saying. Just as she was about to reply, the elevator opened and a middle-aged man in a black suit rushed out of it. The moment that he saw Jack, he rushed towards him. "Mr. Jack, you've already arrived?" Chris said as soon as he arrived in front of Jack. Jack had said that he would be here at about 10:30. Who would have known that Jack would be here by 10, over 30 minutes earlier? But it wasn't like there was a problem. Everything was already in position. "Unexpectedly, I arrived earlier," Jack replied. He then turned towards Celine and said, "If you want a floor here, just tell me which one it is as long as it's not among the top 5. Although he could agree to give her a floor as a sign of friendship, there was a limit to how much he could do. There was no way that he could offer the whole building to show his sincerity, right? So, for now, he could only offer her a single floor. There was no way that he would allow the building that was going to be his enterprise's headquarters to have several other companies that are not subsidiaries under his enterprise. And all the subsidiary companies under him had to be fully owned by his enterprise. Although Celine still had some doubts about what Jack was saying, upon seeing that Chris didn't seem to disagree, she tended to believe him. At this time, the receptionist looked at Chris and said, "Mr. Chris, this sir here is claiming that we're giving free floors here. Can you please let him know that there are no free floors here?" Chris was surprised for a moment before he hurriedly said to Jack, "Mr. Jack, I'm sorry that I haven't introduced you to some of the employees here. Dennis, this is Mr. Jack, the owner of this building." The moment that Dennis heard that Jack was the owner of the building, he was shocked. He then thought to himself, "Why am I so stupid? Anyone who can say something like there are free floors here would definitely have to be the owner. After all, how can the guards allow him to enter when nobody other than members of the management department can come in other than the hygiene department?" As he thought to this point, his back was drenched in sweat. He bowed to Jack and said, "I'm sorry, sir, for my ignorance. No need to sweat about it. You didn't know about me, so you don't need to worry. Just do your work well. Jack said. Thank you, boss. Dennis nodded before going back to his desk. Celine, on the other hand, was surprised. According to what Jack had told her previously, he had invested more than $150 million in the grocery department. But now, if this building was added, considering the location as well as the design, it should cost more than $500 million. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but wonder what Jack's real background was. To be able to afford such a building, Jack had to have enough money in stock to make sure that the company had money to ensure that the business was running. After getting into the elevator, they headed towards the 7th floor. As soon as they got out of the elevator, Celine pulled Jack aside and asked, You bought the whole building? Yeah, I bought it on Saturday. Jack replied calmly. After a moment, he continued, Interested in relocating the office here? Till this moment, Celine still found it hard to believe that Jack was solely depending on himself. And if it was true, from what family was he from to be able to get that amount of money? He had to come from a prominent one. But in the capital where her family was based, she didn't hear of his name. Someone like Jack, with amazing looks and ambition, she was sure that she would have heard about him. But she never heard of him. Thinking to this point, she noticed that till this moment, Jack had never given away his surname. After a moment of thinking, Celine shook her head and said, Not for now. I have to stabilize the condition of the company first. Once the company is on track, I can see if it's possible to transfer it. All right then. You can just choose a floor and I'll reserve it for you. Jack said. Okay then. Celine nodded as they followed Chris into a meeting room. The room was quite big in that it could accommodate almost 50 people at the same time. There was a long table that was covered in a white cloth. There were chairs surrounding the rectangular table. The main seat was placed on one end of the table. Then, on its right, there was another chair that was slightly to the side. Then, the other chairs followed. Currently, in the room, there were 8 people in the room, including Agnes. Although Agnes wasn't a manager yet, she would be holding the position as soon as she moves to the newly bought shop in Yellow City and hires some people to do the work that she was doing. Alongside Chris, it could be said that there were 9 managers, each zone having a manager of its own. Chris was in charge of all these managers. But there would be another manager coming in soon who would be in charge of everyone, including Chris. Maybe in the future, he may make her the general manager of several departments in Jackson Enterprise. But that would obviously have to depend on her performance. Otherwise, why would he just promote someone if they didn't put on an effort in their work? After sitting on the main seat, Celine sat to his right while Chris to his left. Although this could have been considered as a meeting that only involved the core members of the department, Jack didn't mind Celine's presence at all. There was nothing that much important that they were discussing and could be used against him in the future. Furthermore, he believed that since the two of them were not enemies, she wouldn't attack him, right? The discussion was mainly on how to ensure that all the groceries in the town were run accordingly. Upon seeing the ideas that they were giving, he felt that there was nothing wrong for now. Celine would also occasionally point out a few things that she felt would be good. At the end of the meeting, it was decided that advertisement would be carried out. Jack wanted to make sure that he would begin accumulating the reputation for the enterprise before it went public in the future. He then left Chris an instruction to open the department's bank account. He had previously forgotten about it, but now he could let Chris handle it. After the meeting was over, Jack left with Celine. After leaving the building, he asked, Where are you going to next? I want to go back to the company. There's so much to handle at the moment, and I'm afraid that Faith might be overwhelmed. The company will start operating next month, and there are still a few more things that need handling. Celine replied. Jack nodded. He too knew that starting a company from scratch required both time and dedication. It wasn't a simple thing as starting a stall by the roadside. Where are you heading to now? Celine asked curiously. I'm going to the bank. I have something to discuss with the manager, Mr. Heyman. Jack replied. Celine nodded. She didn't ask what the discussion was about as the level of trust between them hadn't reached that level yet. After getting to Glaze Hotel, it was already noon. So they took their lunch together before Jack sent Celine to the company. The company was called Eminent Beauty. After dropping her off, Jack drove the Bentley Continental GT towards the bank building. After parking, he stepped into the bank's lobby area. Just as he had thought, the bank was almost full to the brink. Although the seats were all occupied, there were still some people that had decided to wait while standing. Jack just sighed as he stepped into the elevator. If his business had so many customers, he surely would benefit greatly. Not long after that, the elevator opened on the 7th floor. The moment that he stepped onto this floor, he found that there were two people who seemed to be waiting for their turn to arrive. Jack wasn't sure if there was a person inside or not. But what he knew was that what he wanted to talk to Heyman about wasn't going to take long. So he walked towards the reception. Ivy was still there, doing her job as a secretary. The moment that he arrived in front of her desk, he found that she was quite busy with something on her computer. Upon noticing that there was someone in front of her desk, without even raising her head, she said, "Can you please wait for a moment? In 5 minutes, I'll be done here. You can wait at the lobby area." According to the way that she was saying these words, Jack could see that it seemed that she was used to saying them. "Miss Ivy, I've got an issue to discuss with Mr. Heyman. I don't know if that's possible," Jack asked. The moment that Ivy heard the familiar voice, she raised her head hurriedly and looked at Jack. The moment that she confirmed that he was the one, she greeted, "Hello, Mr. Jack. I didn't know that you were the one here."